In this video, we'll discuss organizing complicated workflows. By the end of this video, you should understand how you might organize a complicated workflow, the steps you should take when implementing the data science workflow in terms of organization, and have a good understanding of the source to results mentality. So if you remember, a workflow is a standardized and repeatable process that takes a project from start to finish. For data analysis projects, this can lead to the data science workflow. And this is the very general layout of the data science workflow, starting where you acquire data and moving through many steps to the point where you communicate, make decisions, and then evaluate every step of the process to improve your decision making. So what you can see from this is a workflow is broken into a series of discrete steps. Every process in that workflow should clearly fit into a specific spot in the workflow. On top of that, every process in that workflow should define its precedent steps, or the steps that come before it, the inputs that it relies on, and the outputs that it generates in that workflow. What this all means is that implementing a workflow implies some level of organization. So how should you think about that organization? In data science or data analysis projects, your workflow organization should support the core principles of data science, and these are reproducibility and transparency. So how do you do this in practice? And remember, the data science workflow takes you from specifying data all the way to making decisions. So first, how do we make this reproducible? The idea here is that anyone should be able to go from the start of your workflow all the way to the end and be able to obtain the exact same results. And secondly, how do we make this transparent? When your workflow is transparent, anyone should understand where the conclusions are coming from, what's driving your decisions or your results, and be able to trace each one of those conclusions, decisions, or results all the way back through the steps that led to that decision or result. So first, focusing on reproducibility. Again, reproducing a workflow requires that someone be able to identify each step and complete all of those steps in order. So how do we implement this in practice? What we're going to do is we're going to implement every step in a script. The nice thing about this is R scripts, or any script in a programming language, the contents of those scripts are unambiguous. Anyone running the script should be able to take some set of inputs and get the exact same outputs from those scripts. In a lot of the examples that I'm going to give in class, we do this with just a single script. It will take us all the way from the start to the finish. But the fact is, most real-world workflows require many steps that might be involved in many scripts. So what are you going to do if you have many components to your workflow? So if your workflow is divided into many components, the first thing you need to do is make clear the order in which all of those scripts are run, or all of those components are run. There's several ways that you can approach this. You can provide additional documentation that lists each script or each component that needs to be run in the order it needs to be run. You can name script files so the order in which they're supposed to be run is clear. So you can put numbers at the start of your script names, or you can name them in such a way that it's very clear to anyone looking at them how they should be run. Alternatively, you can make a superscript that calls each of those scripts in order. So this is one large script that is going to reference each of the components of your workflow and call all of them in order. Now, I want you to note that these things aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, you should probably be doing all of them when you have complicated workflows. Some of the steps that you can take to make your complicated workflow transparent is to document all of the prerequisites, the inputs, and the outputs of each step of your workflow. Again, you can achieve this by providing additional documentation. A very nice way to do this, if all of your steps are embodied in scripts, is to place comments at the start of each script that clearly define what the prerequisites, inputs, and outputs of that script are. Another handy thing that you can do is name output files in such a way that they match the names of the scripts that generate them. So it's very easy when you're looking at an output file to know which script generated it. Again, doing this, looking at any step, you can determine which steps need to be run first and which subsequent steps depend on the current step that you're looking at. So what are other things we can be doing to keep our workflows organized, particularly with a mind on transparency and reproducibility? The first thing you can do is keep your files organized. And step one there is don't commingle separate workflows. If you have several workflows that you're working on that have different end goals, don't mash them together in a single place. Likewise, you should separate your scripts from your data. Scripts are computer code that should be run by a computer. Data are outputs from those scripts. You should keep those in separate locations. Third, and I can't emphasize this enough, you should always keep a pristine copy of your source data. And what I mean by this is if you download some data off the internet, you should keep an unmodified version of that data that you can always go back to if you'd like to restart your analysis. Lastly, you should clearly label all the data that you've processed. So you have a pristine copy of data that's your original source data. It should be distinct and easily identifiable and separate from data that you've created on your own as derivatives of those source data. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, this seems like a lot of extra work. And I'll tell you that keeping workflows organized is a lot of work. If it was easy, everyone would do it. And I'm sure you're under a lot of time pressure right now. You have several classes, deadlines, there could be exams coming up, there could just be days where it's 2 a.m., you're up late trying to get things done, you just want to sleep. And so there's a lot of reasons that you might cut corners and just not do these kind of organizational steps just to get something that works done. I can tell you from my own experience, it's not going to get any better after you graduate. There are still deadlines. These deadlines have high stakes. And it's really important to understand the extra work that you put into organizing your workflow pays off quickly. Importantly, you avoid a lot of wasted time. You're going to go back and look at things that you've done in the past. And if you aren't organized, you're going to spend time trying to figure out what you did before. Sometimes you want to update your work, and it can be really complicated if it's not organized. Lastly, when you get to the end of your workflow, you might realize there's problems. And if you don't keep it organized, it's very difficult to track down those problems and isolate the sources of those issues. So as you're thinking about data analysis projects, I really want you to have a source to results mentality in mind. And what I mean by this is you should have a series of steps that take you all the way from your original data to your results. This series of steps should be straightforward to reproduce. It should be clear how all the steps are implemented, which order they're implemented in, and how you implement them. And it should be clear where the results come from. Having these things in mind is really going to improve the overall quality of your work, because you'll be able to identify mistakes and identify problems with your analysis. And also it's going to take you less time to complete tasks if you just incur a little bit of this organizational overhead up front.